The studio was alive with bright lights and restless energy. The audience was buzzing. The cameras rolled smoothly on their tracks. The host's voice carried the kind of confidence that filled the room. Tonight's show had been sold out. For weeks. And the biggest draw was the man sitting quietly in the guest chair. KeanuReeves wore a simple, charcoal jacket over a plain black t-shirt. No flashy jewelry, no loud patterns, nothing to steal attention from the calm way he held himself. He sat with his hands loosely folded, listening as the host warmed up the crowd with jokes about traffic, celebrity gossip, and the latest viral news. Everyone laughed easily. The atmosphere was lightened, till the host leaned toward Keanu with a smirk that hinted at something else. "So Keanu," the host began, "we've all heard the stories. You ride the bus, you give up your seat. You even carry your own groceries. Tell me, are you just pretending to be humble, or do you really not know you're supposed to be Hollywood royalty?" The crowd laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that felt like it was waiting to see what would happen next. The tone in the question wasn't just playful, it was edged. The host's grin widened, expecting Keanu to play along and make himself the punchline. Keanu smiled faintly, almost like he was letting the silence stretch on purpose. "I'm not pretending," he said slowly. "I just think life isn't about convincing people you're important. It's about remembering that everyone else is." The audience quieted a little. The host chuckled, but it didn't land the same way. "Sure," he said, "but come on, you could take private jets. You could have a driver. You're telling me you'd rather be on a bus with strangers than in a limousine?" Keanu looked out toward the audience, scanning faces like he was searching for someone specific. "A limousine gets you there," he said. "It doesn't tell you anything about the world. The bus, the subway, walking down the street, that's where you see people as they really are. And sometimes you see yourself more clearly, too." A woman in the front row nodded slowly. The host shifted in his seat, sensing the change in the room but trying to keep control. "All right," he said, "so you're saying there's value in mingling with the common people?"
Hey.
Keanu's eyes softened. "I'm saying there's no such thing as common people. Everyone has a story. Everyone matters the same." The room went still for a moment. The laughter didn't come this time. Instead, there was a wave of quiet agreement, a few soft claps that grew until half the audience was applauding. The host's grin faltered, but Keanu wasn't finished. "You know," he continued, "one day on the bus an older man sat next to me. He had a worn coat and tired eyes. We didn't talk. When he got up to leave, he handed me half a sandwich. Didn't say a word. I still think about that. He had nothing to prove. He just shared what he had." The applause grew louder, and now the crowd's focus had shifted completely. They weren't watching the host anymore. They were locked on Keanu. The energy in the room belonged to him. Not because he took it, but because he earned it. The host gave a stiff laugh. "Well, you've certainly got them on your side," he said, trying to play it off. Keanu's single quotes a smile was quiet, almost invisible. "I don't need them on my side," he said. "I just hope they're on each other's." And with that, the audience erupted in a standing ovation, something that almost never happened in the middle of an interview. The host leaned back in his chair, realizing what had just happened. The joke he had planned had slipped through his fingers. And the man he'd meant to tease had just turned the room into his own. Without raising his voice, what no one knew was that this moment was only the beginning, because before the night was over, something would happen in that studio that would test Keanu's calm in a way even he did not expect. The applause from the audience was still echoing when the host tried to steer the conversation back toward safer, more lighthearted ground. He asked about Keanu's latest movie, about stunts and co-stars, but the energy in the room had shifted. People weren't leaning forward for the punchlines anymore. They were leaning forward to hear more of him between questions. Keanu glanced around. His eyes didn't just scan the crowd. They landed on faces, held them for a second, then moved on, as if he was listening to the room itself. The host didn't notice. He was focused on his next planned segment designed to get a laugh at Keanu's expense. "All right," the host said, his tone picking up again. "We've got a little game we like to play here. It's called Celebrity Confessions. We've picked some. Let's call them interesting facts about you from the internet. Tell us if they're true or false. A big screen lit up behind them. The first fact appeared in bold letters. KeanuReeves was spotted eating alone in a park, feeding pigeons for over an hour. The audience chuckled. The host grinned, waiting for him to squirm. So, true or false? Hollywood superstar feeding pigeons instead of dining at a 5-star restaurant. Keanu didn't even blink. True, he said simply. It was a good day. The crowd laughed and nodded him, but with a kind of warmth, as if his answer gave them permission to smile at something simple. The host's smirk wavered, but he quickly brought up the next fact. KeanuReeves has been seen giving up his subway seat for strangers on multiple occasions. True, Keanu said again. If someone needs a seat more than me, they get it. It's not a headline, it's just being human. The applause came again, stronger now. The host glanced toward the cameras, realizing the segment was backfiring. Each funny fact was making Keanu look better, not worse. But then the third fact appeared, and the tone shifted. KeanuReeves once paid for a stranger's groceries. Without saying a word, the audience awed. The host leaned in, clearly expecting this one to be exaggerated. Come on, is that real? Keanu looked down for a moment, as if pulling the memory from somewhere deep. It's real, he said quietly. She was short on cash. I didn't want to embarrass her, so I just covered it. She left before she knew it was me. Way it should be. The room went silent for a beat. Then, instead of laughter, the sound of hands coming together filled the air. Applause that swelled and didn't stop right away. In that moment, it was obvious to everyone in the studio. Crowd had chosen him. They weren't here for the host's jokes anymore. They were here for the man who spoke with honesty, who didn't dress his stories in drama, who let silence say as much as his words backstage. A segment producer whispered to another, "He's flipping the whole show without even trying." But what no one realized yet was that the show wasn't going to end with the last scripted question. Something unplanned was about to happen in the final minutes, something that would leave not just the audience but the host himself, looking at Keanu in a completely different way. The cameras rolled into the next segment, but the air in the studio felt different now. The host was still smiling, still delivering his lines. But there was a faint edge to his voice, like someone who knew the momentum had shifted and didn't know how to get it back. He moved on to audience Q&A, a light-hearted bit where random guests could ask the celebrity anything. It was supposed to be fun, unpredictable, and easy to control. The first question was harmless, a teenage boy asking about Keanu's favorite action scene. Keanu answered warmly, adding a little behind-the-scenes detail that made the audience laugh. The second question came from a woman in the third row. "Keanu," she began, her voice shaking slightly, "I just wanted to say, your kindness story on the subway changed the way I see people. I gave up my seat for someone yesterday and it felt like I did something that mattered." The audience clapped and Keanu's face softened. "Thank you," he said quietly. Sometimes it's the smallest things that last the longest. But the host tried to jump in with a joke to keep it light, but the third question cut right through the room's rhythm. A man in the back stood up, holding the microphone with both hands. "Keanu, I'm not here to ask a question. Just want to thank you. 3 years ago, I was at my lowest. I saw a clip of you helping someone carry their groceries on the street. I don't know why, but it stayed with me. I told myself if someone like you could still care about a stranger, maybe I could care about myself again. I'm alive today because of that." The audience went dead silent. Even the host's face froze for a moment. The cameras instinctively zoomed in on Keanu. Keanu leaned forward, his voice gentle but steady. "I'm glad you stayed," he said. "The world is better with you in it." The man's eyes welled up. A few people in the audience wiped their own tears. The host cleared his throat, clearly unsure how to transition back to jokes. But before he could speak, Keanu reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, well-worn notebook. "I've been carrying this for years," he explained. "Whenever someone tells me a moment mattered to them, I write it down. Not their names, just the moment. Because those are the things worth remembering." He flipped to a blank page, clicked his pen, and asked, Can I write yours? Da 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 da. Man nodded, and the cameras caught the sight of Keanu bending over the page, his handwriting slow and deliberate. When he finished, he tore out the page, folded it, and handed it to the man. "This one's for you," Keanu said, "so you remember too." The audience broke into applause. The quick, polite kind, but a deep, rolling sound that came from somewhere honest and somewhere in that moment. The host realized the crowd wasn't just choosing Keanu over him, they were connecting with him on a level no segment or punchline could match. But neither the host nor the audience knew that the most powerful moment of the night was still coming. And it wouldn't be scripted, rehearsed, or even caught fully on camera. It would happen in the raw space between the show's polished edges. Asterisk, the applause finally settled. But the energy in the room felt heavier, more focused. The host, sensing he had to win back control, moved toward the closing segment. He kept his smile wide, his tone playful, but there was a faint tightness in his voice. "All right," he said, "before we wrap up, we've got a fun little challenge. For Keanu, it's a game we call the speed seat. I'll ask quick questions, and you give me quick answers. No deep life lessons, no subway stories, just fast fun." The audience laughed politely, but their eyes stayed on Keanu. "Favorite meal?" the host began. "Rice and vegetables," Keanu replied simply. "Favorite luxury?" the host asked, leaning forward. "Time," Keanu said without missing a beat. The audience chuckled softly, some nodding at the unexpected answer. The host rolled his eyes in mock exasperation. "See, this is what I mean. He can't even give me a normal answer." Keanu smiled faintly. Normal depends on who you ask. The next question was clearly meant to corner him. If you could trade lives with someone rich and powerful for a day, who would it be? Keanu didn't hesitate. "No one. I'd rather spend the day learning someone else's story than pretending to live it." The audience clapped again. The host sighed, pretending to give up. But inside he could feel the show slipping further from his hands, and then it happened, something no one planned. A crew member at the edge of the stage tripped over a cable, nearly dropping a heavy light stand. The sudden crash startled the audience. The young man froze, wide. Knowing that in a live show every mistake felt 100 times bigger, without thinking, Keanu was on his feet. He crossed the stage in 3 quick steps, grabbed the stand to steady it, and helped the crew member set it upright. "You okay?" Keanu asked, his voice calm and low. The crew member nodded quickly, his face red. "Yeah, sorry," Keanu put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't be sorry. Everyone stumbles. The important thing is you got back up." The cameras caught the whole exchange. The host stayed in his seat, unsure how to follow it up. The audience, however, reacted instantly. Applause rising into cheers, the kind of sound that fills a room with unity. Keanu returned to his chair, his composure unchanged. "Where were we?" he asked softly, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But it had. Because in that unplanned moment, every person in that room saw the same thing. This wasn't just a man telling stories about kindness. This was a man who lived them, even when no one was supposed to be watching. The host forced a laugh and moved to wrap the show. But the applause wouldn't stop. The cameras rolled longer than planned, catching faces in the crowd, some smiling, some looking thoughtful, some looking like they had just been reminded of something they'd forgotten about themselves. What Keanu didn't know was that one of those faces belonged to a woman who had been silently planning to end her own life that night. And what happened after the show would turn his quiet act of kindness into the moment that changed everything for her. The show ended, but the sound of the applause seemed to follow Keanu long after he left the stage. He slipped out of the studio quietly, avoiding the back exit where paparazzi waited. The night air outside was cool, carrying the faint smell of rain. He walked a few blocks before finding a quiet street where the city's noise felt muted. He didn't notice the woman following at first. She was small, wrapped in a faded gray coat, her steps uncertain. When he stopped near a corner bookstore to check his phone, she hesitated, then spoke. "Mr. Reeves?" Her voice was barely more than a whisper. He turned, his face calm but attentive. "Yes." She took a shaky breath. I was in the audience tonight. I wasn't supposed to be. My friend had the ticket but couldn't come. She gave it too. Me, I almost didn't use it. Keanu waited, sensing there was more. She looked down at her hands. Before the show, I'd decided tonight would be my last night. I didn't tell anyone. I'd been carrying too much for too long. And then I watched you. Not just what you said, but how you helped that crew member. How you didn't make a big deal of it. Her voice trembled. It reminded me of something my father used to say. Sometimes all you need is one person to notice you're still here. You noticed him. And for some reason, it made me feel like maybe someone could notice me too. Keanu stepped closer, his voice low and steady. I'm glad you stayed tonight. I'm even more glad you're still here right now. She wiped at her eyes quickly. I don't know if I can keep going, but I'm going to try, because you made me believe there's still kindness in the world. Keanu nodded gently. There is. And sometimes, it starts with deciding to give yourself one more day. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his leather notebook. Would you let me write this moment down? Not your name, just the fact that you chose to stay? She nodded, watching as he wrote slowly. Tonight, someone decided to give the world one more chance. That choice matters more than they know. He tore out the page, folded it, and handed it to her. Keep it. Read it when you forget why you stayed. Woman held the paper to her chest. Thank you. As she walked away, Keanu stood for a long moment in the quiet street, feeling the weight of what had just happened. He had come to the show expecting jokes and scripted questions. But somehow, the night had become something far deeper. What he didn't know was that this woman's story soon reached the host himself and that it would lead to a final, unexpected meeting that would change how even the host saw him forever. Asterisk, 2 weeks passed before Keanu heard from the show again. The call came from the host's assistant, her tone unusually careful. The host would like to meet you privately, she said. No cameras, no press, just a conversation. Keanu agreed, curious but cautious. They met in a quiet corner of a small cafe far from the studio's bright lights. The host arrived without his usual suit and stage smile. He looked tired, almost uneasy as he sat down. I've been thinking about that night. The host began, wrapping his hands around a coffee cup, about how it all shifted. I know. I tried to make you the joke, and you handled it with more grace than I deserved. Keanu said nothing, waiting. The host took a deep breath. After the show, a letter came to the studio. It was from a woman who said she'd been in the audience. She said she'd been ready to end everything. But watching you help that crew member and hearing what you said to her afterward changed her mind. She wrote that she's still here because of that night. Keanu's expression softened. I met her after the show, she told me. The host stared at him, something breaking in his voice. I didn't know what to do with that. I built a career out of making people laugh, sometimes at someone else's expense. That night, I realized maybe I've been using humor to avoid being real with people. Keanu leaned forward slightly. Laughter matters, but so does listening. Sometimes you can do both. The host gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. I want to try. I want to make the show a place where moments like that can happen on purpose, not by accident. Keanu nodded. Then start by making room for them. There was a long silence between them, not awkward, but steady. The kind that means something has shifted. Before they left, the host hesitated. Can I ask? That notebook you carry? Would you ever share it with me? Keanu thought for a moment, then reached into his coat. He pulled out the leather-bound notebook and slid it across the table, read it. But remember, these aren't my moments. They belong to the people who lived them. The host opened it, flipping through page after page of small, careful handwriting. Kindnesses from strangers, moments of courage, decisions to stay. His eyes lingered on one entry. Tonight someone decided to give the world one more chance. He closed the book slowly. You're right, the host said quietly. These moments belong to all of us. As they stood to leave, Keanu gave a small smile. They only belong to us if we keep making them. They parted ways outside, the city moving around them. The host walked away with the notebook under his arm, the weight of it both heavy and necessary. Keanu turned down the street, disappearing. Into the crowd, just another face among strangers, right where he had always felt most at home.